Founded in 1973, Pro Farmer has stayed true to its mission of leveling the information playing field, giving farmers the same information that the grain handlers and firms that buy your crops have.
While remaining the nation's leading marketing newsletter, Pro Farmer has expanded its portfolio to now include special reports, email, and mobile services. But for members, maybe the most valuable service we offer is the ability to pick up the phone and talk to Brian or one of the market analysts yourself.
And this year, our signature event, the Pro Farmer Crop Tour, returns for its 31st year. At its core, this annual expedition is a discovery process. Held the third full week of August since 1993, scouts head to the field and share what they find.
The sampling and measurements are designed to get representative results for crop districts, states, and the entire Midwest, not individual fields or counties. Scouts measure 3 ears of corn or count pods on 3 soybean plants from just one location in each field surveyed. Each sample is then identified by county so it can be tabulated by crop district.
It's a critical juncture of the growing season, with the last USDA report 2 weeks ago and the next coming in a couple of weeks. The crop tour provides a boots-on-the-ground look at this year's crop. And because we've been collecting data for a quarter century, we've been able to do a deep dive into historical comparisons, not only year to year, but even decade to decade.
And as you can see, the tour covers nearly 70% of the U.S. corn and bean acres across the East and West tours. The western leg of the tour kicks off in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and includes evening stops in Grand Island, Nebraska City, and Spencer, Iowa. The eastern tour then starts in Columbus, Ohio, and includes stops in Indianapolis, Bloomington, Illinois, and Iowa City. And both legs of the tour then finish up together Thursday evening in Rochester, Minnesota.
There are multiple ways to follow along as the tour winds its way across farm country. First, on Twitter, search for #PFTour23 to find all kinds of pictures and comments from scouts from both legs of the tour. It's a great tool to interact with those scouts and other followers.
Extensive coverage of the tour can also be found across the family of Farm Journal properties, including 2 hours of AgriTalk radio each day from Chip Flory, daily updates on ProFarmer.com, AgWeb.com, and Ag Day TV.
We'll wrap up Crop Tour with a special edition of U.S. Farm Report and a special Crop Tour section to be found in the August issue of Top Producer Magazine.
The Pro Farmer Crop Tour is back once again, and we invite you to come along for the ride.
Any better. Ted absolutely caught everything there. Sherman, as a farmer, tell us from that angle what you gain from this week and the ability to see other parts. So you farm in the Eastern Corn Belt, but you go on the western leg of the tour. I'm assuming that's so you see the Corn Belt as a whole.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I like to go out to the West. I've been doing this, I don't know, 6, 7 years now. It's a whole different area, different territory. I see a lot of what's in Southern Illinois already. So I like to go out and see what is in, the other states, the topography of everything. It's neat to see the different farms, the different land, the different soil structures, how other people farm. But like Ted said, I'm getting to be where I have a lot of friends on this tour. And I want to, meet with them and talk with them and meet new people. Some of the time it's the guys from NASS are there, those that they're interesting to talk to, and just new folks that do come on the tour. I think are nice to meet and talk with. But I also, want to see what crop size looks like because I have to market my own grain. I'm also a market analyst and a commodity broker. So like Ted, I've got my own clients as well. I will be doing radio and probably some stuff for RFD as well every day on tour. So I have to keep up with that. But I need to see, I want to see what the crop actually looks like. Is there a trouble area somewhere? Last year, Nebraska and parts of South Dakota was really bad, parts of those areas, and part of Iowa as well. And I want to see where the trouble areas are, and are they really as bad, as some guys make out, or are they not as bad, so what are we going to end up with a crop size? These are decisions that, are going to be made. This crop tour is very important. The market pays a lot of attention to it. And I just think it's something that I've been on and got invited to, and I don't know. I think I would miss if I don't go, miss it, quite a bit if I would, stopped going. But it is fun to go on. It is a lot of work. You're up early of a morning. It's long days. You're in the cornfields, the bean fields, and and yeah, part of the fun is trying to find a place to eat for lunch and whatnot, like Ted said. But just the different areas, seeing those different areas, those are a joy to me to look at and see how some of the farms are. But it's worthwhile. It's a worthwhile trip. It is a long trip by the time I get back. Last couple of years, I put over 3,000 miles on my truck, and I'll be driving again this year as well. So it's just something I really do enjoy, but my clients, they're texting me while I'm out there and saying, hey, what's it look like? What are you seeing? And, now guys are getting back here, used to me going, and they're asking me ahead of time, when are you going? When are you going? I'm on the ethanol plant board down here locally as well. And they're asking, what are you going to see? And, let us know what you're seeing, and things like that. So it is, really important to quite a few people in the industry, way it looks.
Yeah, very important, and has become a major event, for the corn and soybean markets. But Sherman, you touched on one of the key things. It's a working tour. It's not a windshield tour. We ask a lot of our scouts, and we thank a lot of you guys because we do ask so much of you over the course of that week. Those 4 days that we'll be in the fields, as you can see there on the screen. A week from today, we start August 21st, and we wrap up a week from this Thursday on the 24th. I mentioned it before, but we've done 31 of these, or this will be our 31st. Chip, you've been a part of every single one of them. What's Crop Tour mean to you?
There we go. It's one of those weeks. It's an event that we put a pile of planning into, that we put some unbelievable preparation into. And from my perspective and from your perspective, Brian, I don't know that the tour has changed all that much over the years, because you and I are so focused on making sure that the scouts get to where they need to be, making sure that the scouts are taken care of, making sure that the data comes in and is clean, is usable. It's still about the discovery process for you and me. It's still about the investigative reporting that is the whole reason that we took over Crop Tour back in 1993. It was great content for Pro Farmer members. It was information that they needed. It helped to further level the playing field between farmers and the commercial grain buyers. That's number one on the mission statement at Pro Farmer, is to level that playing field. And I don't know if there's anything that we do at Pro Farmer that helps to do that more than Crop Tour. And that's why Crop Tour is it, and it's been this way since day one, that since 1993. Pro Farmer has always made the Crop Tour information available to everyone and anyone. We feel that it is that important, and the information is that critical to helping farmers making an informed decision in their marketing, just to be smarter businessmen about what they're doing. We feel that it is that important that we've always made it available to everybody. You don't have to be a Pro Farmer member to get the information. And it's, I think that's a big part of the reason why it is the event that it is. There's a ton of tours every year that happen. In the 2 weeks leading up to the August crop production report, all kinds of tours. The 2 weeks leading up to September, there's going to be more tours out there, but you don't hear about those. You don't see the results from those. This tour, we share it with everybody. because it's that effort to level the playing field with those other crop tours that are going on out there.
Yeah, and really, Chip, we pull about 1,700 samples
Yeah.
corn and 1,700 samples of soybeans during the week. So second to USDA in terms of number of samples. Now USDA, they do their work on a monthly basis and they continue to go back to it. This is a 1 week event for us, but we get a lot of exposure because of that, because
Yeah.
of the amount of samples that we pull, and like I said, second only to USDA in that regards. And USDA a couple years ago went to where they stopped doing the field objective field surveys in the August crop
Right.
production report, and so the Pro Farmer is the first broad-based look across the Corn Belt at the at actual samples pulled from fields, and
Right.
so that I think is important, and the scope of it. We have literally 100 scouts, 100 plus scouts this year, and they come from all over the country. They come from all over the world. And like I said, and the guys said before, everybody wants to know what the potential is for the size of the U.S. corn and soybean crops.
Right.
And that is really the number one driver. It's the data, like you mentioned, Chip. This crop tour, it's got so many aspects to it and so many different branches. But when it all comes down to it, it's about the data, and the data drives crop tour more than crop tour drives the data, I would say.
Absolutely.
It's just it's a fact-finding mission in terms of what we're out there doing. One bit of housekeeping I need to mention: if you have a question, please submit that in the Q&A section on the bottom rail. Do not try via the chat. That is only enabled for us as panelists. So use the Q&A button on your lower rail if you have a question, and we will get to those as they pop up throughout. Otherwise, we will have a question and answer session at the end too, if you want to wait until the end to get to those questions. Okay. The video you saw at the beginning kind of touched on it, but how can you participate and how can you get the data, all this data that we've talked about? There are several ways, many ways actually. You can do it. You can go to profarmer.com, agweb.com. Chip, his radio show is on every day at 10:06 a.m. and 2:06 p.m. Central Time. So that's an hour-long radio program if you haven't listened to that. And I will be on every day. Chip will be on every day, talking about what we've seen during the morning and through the early afternoon of those days, what we saw the previous day. You can follow it on Twitter, hashtag, or X now, formerly Twitter, hashtag PF2or23. Farm radio stations, many of them carry the coverage, and then the in-person and virtual meetings. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear Sherman and Ted talk about how much media they are going to be doing. There are questions out there about just how, what are they hiding? How are they doing this? There's always that, conspiracy theories out there that we're in cahoots with this group or with that group, whatever it might be. There's no way I'm controlling what Sherman is saying. There's definitely no way that we're controlling what Ted is saying. If we see something different than Ted does, you're going to hear two different things. It's because we're in two very different locations. Even if we're on the Western Tour, the Western Tour has been running 10 routes for the same 10 routes since 1998. The Eastern Tour is running 12 routes. And I believe that there's been some modification over the years, just simply because we're ending up in different locations. But the Western Tour has been running the same routes for, Brian, or Eastern, probably for at least 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah. And that's part of the year-to-year consistency that makes the tour what it is. But but even though we're on the Western Tour, it's not like we all hop in a bus and go from one stop to the next.
No, those routes are predetermined routes, but where we stop is not predetermined. And we stress to our crop scouts about the randomness. We don't look for the best field. We don't look for the worst field. And even if we did, I'll be honest with you, all these years, sometimes when you pull up and it looks ugly as sin from the road, you get out there and you're pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
And sometimes when it looks absolutely beautiful from the road, you get out there and you're like, whoa, what happened? Because it doesn't have the same innards as it did from the road. You know, the looks on the surface are much better than what it produces and or will produce. Ted, can you talk a little bit about the randomness and just, you know, from a scout's perspective, explain how we select fields?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like you said, the routes are the same, but where you stop on those routes really never are, right? I mean, you try to make a stop every 15 minutes or so. You, as scouts, you do kind of look for corn and bean fields that are close to each other, which, by the way, that changes every year because, you know, there's different things planted on different ground every year. So even if we were to stop in the same field every year, which we don't, but even if we did, it'd be a different crop most years. So, you know, you just, on the routes you're on, you look for those stops and you got sort of an idea of timing, 15 minutes or number of miles that you try to travel before you get to the next one. And then once you get there, you know, where you pick to enter the field, where you take your sample from, that changes as well. But the idea is that you go into the field past the hedgerows and corn, and then you start your count, right? So you're well into that field. It's not just randomly taking a hedgerow. Yeah, and then beans, you know, you can kind of go in wherever. But yeah, I mean, there's really no. I've had times where I've been on the same route before, right? But it's not like I look at that route and I say, well, I want to stop here, here, and here because that's where I've been before. You know, you just kind of go with the flow of how the day's going. Again, like Sherman said, like I said, you know, we also have that added thing of media. So we sometimes have to make stops based around when we're doing a TV or radio interview. And then, you know, just kind of go with that. Now, I will say, what was it, Sherman, last year? Full disclosure, Sherman and I have been in the same car, Sherman's car, for what is the last 3 years, I think, buddy. Sorry, I'm not going to see. I'm not with you this year, man.
I don't know what you did.
I'll meet you in the middle, right?
Right.
There's that one field that I can think of that I know that we stopped in 2 or possibly 3 years in a row, and not on purpose. It just kind of happened to be where we needed to take a sample each time. But it was just it was such a picturesque sort of field that it was, you know, memorable, and we just kind of happened upon it. It's like, well, I guess we're doing this field again. But, you know, aside from that, again, it's completely random, right? I mean, again, I'll say a lot of it is based on the flow of the day, and that's what makes it the most random, is because every day on tour doesn't go exactly as planned, and every day on tour doesn't go exactly the same as it did the day before or the year before.
Yeah, and if you come in with a preconceived notion, you're going to be wrong. I mean, that's the one thing about crop tour. It's data finding, and if you think you know exactly how it's going to be or what you're going to see, I guarantee you there will be surprises. Sherman, talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen over the years that maybe did surprise you, whether it's the quality of the field from the road and then the difference when you get out into it, especially in the corn. You know, those types of things year to year. This year, obviously, we had the drought early in the year, and some of those areas have been relieved of some of that. Impacts that we'll see as we move into fields, and what you anticipate some of those early season conditions may mean to what we'll find on crop tour in a week.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, you know, the girth of some of the years. We had a lot of dry weather early on, and that, you know, obviously determines, you know, how much stress the plant was under and when that plant ear is size is determined. So you'll be able to tell from that a lot of times, but every year it's interesting to see from state to state the different quality of stand counts. I can specifically remember a lot of times in Nebraska, there's a lot of not the greatest stands, double ups, skips in planting. But when I get to Minnesota, it's like picket line fence. I mean, some of those fields we stop in there are so good you can't hardly walk between the between the stalks because their spacing is so good. So it's interesting to see the different ways different guys plant, how well they do a job of doing that. So I don't know. I think this year is going to be interesting. I don't expect this year to see anything near as bad as what I did last year in South Dakota and Nebraska by any stretch of the imagination. I am going to be interested to see what, you guys on the eastern side of the tour see in Illinois and that eastern side of Iowa. Those are the two areas I think that could be surprisingly good or bad, one way or the other. I really don't know. But the other part of the tour, it gets me is the averages. You guys you gather this information year after year after year, and you smooth it out and you come up with a pretty good average. I mean, because like here, I can take you to one of my fields and I know where the good spot of that field is, and we might walk into a good spot in a field on tour, or we may walk into the worst part of the field on tour, and we don't know. But I think there's the randomness of it, and then the averaging out over the years with all the data that you guys have collected, I think is a pretty amazing thing to watch.
Yeah. Now, the key point that you made there, Sherman, is we pull samples from the cornfields and calculate a yield. That's from that one spot. What that one spot would calculate out to. The more mature that the crop is, the better our yield formula works. The less mature it is, the less accurate it is. Full disclosure on that. But we are not trying to peg that field. That's why at the end of the week, when we put all 1,700 samples together and come up with one number, it basically turns the entire area that you see on your screen there, where we will be sampling from, into one giant cornfield. And so that is critical. Chip, the other thing is that we pull samples. Yeah, Ted.
Yeah, something that we haven't hit on yet that it just occurred to me, I think is kind of part of the tour too. Everybody knows we're doing it, right? And the guys in the areas that we're running through, a lot of times will kind of be looking out for us. And sometimes, we'll be crawling out of a field and the farmer will come by. And that when that happens, it's kind of nice. I mean, it's nice and it's not at the same time. One, we're on a schedule, so it's like, okay, we've only got about 10 minutes, not even 10 minutes to talk. But it's great to hear the backstory of, when that field was planted, what sort of issues they've had throughout the year, both from a weather standpoint and from a pest standpoint. And just so you get like the backstory of that particular field and that particular area, hail, things like that. So, that's always a real nice thing. And I don't know if that gets translated as much into, what the findings end up being. I will say at the evening meetings, when you hear the agronomists talk about the area that we've gone through and what issues they've had. So you do get that in the meetings a little bit, but to actually hear it from, the guy whose field that is, it's significant and it means something. And it's great to have that too.
Well, it's all part of the data gathering and all part of the story, as you said. And by the end of the week, when you add all those little things up that don't go into the yield formula for corn or the soybean pod count for soybeans, it completes the story, so to speak. It helps you connect more dots. Chip, I was going to ask you about that. We collect more than just the yield sample from on corn and the soybean pod counts. We measure soil moisture, stage of growth. All those things come into play within the course of the data gathering throughout the week.
Yeah. And plant health on corn as well, I think is very important. And it's become much more important with tar spot coming in later in the season. I remember all the way back to 1995 when gray leaf spot showed up for the first time. And we kept making notes that there was some kind of a disease in the cornfields. At that time, we didn't know what it was until we got a plant pathologist on it. But the impact that gray leaf spot had on the 95 crop, the way that crop turned out compared to the expectations, even when we were out there in the field, was really, really something. Something that Ted said about the variability out there. The variability on this year's crop, there's always variability. There have been some years where the crop was very consistent, but that's an exception. I can think of a handful of crops that were very consistent from east to west. But this year, I think the variability is ramped up some. It's not just field to field variability. It is going to be variability within the field. And it's because of when the crop was planted. We had some cooler conditions. Some areas just got swamped with a 2-3 inch rain as that crop was planted, had a big impact on emergence. We love it when we can go through a cornfield and it looks like those ear sets have been laser leveled. That's fantastic. But when you start seeing ear sets that are up and down the stalk and variable that way, that you're looking at a crop that's going to be really, really kind of difficult to adjust. Now, the way that we handle that on the ear selection is by keeping it consistently random. The way that we keep it consistently random is select the 58th and the 11th ear off of one of the 30-foot plots. So we might pull the 3 best ears in that 30-foot. We might pull the 3 worst ears. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Brian said it. We're not trying to peg the yield in that specific field. We're trying to pull 1,700 representative samples from across the Corn Belt. Brian, there's a question that came in from Anonymous.
Yeah, I was just going to that one there.
And I think you should answer this one. You should start off with this one. What routes or regions are you most curious to see this year?
Well, I think because of the magnitude and size and being the number 2 corn producer, Illinois, I want to see Illinois, and I haven't seen a lot of Illinois this year personally yet, and I haven't been out in fields, so I want to see Illinois. I think that one's going to be critical. Now I live in Northeast Iowa, and so I see the fields all the time, but we've had an up and down year growing wise, and being the number 1 corn producer, Iowa and Illinois are the 2 areas that I want to see the most because they carry so much weight. They're, more than a third of U.S. production comes from those 2 states. And so that is the primary driver. Now, that doesn't mean that the other 5 states that we're in on crop tour don't matter. But when the 2 heavyweights have some variability in them, it's going to matter. And I think at the end of the week, that's going to be one of the critical components. Ted, I'm interested to hear your answer on this one.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I'm going east this year. I'm going to echo your sentiment, man. All through central Illinois, western Indiana, and eastern Iowa. That's my biggest sort of question mark there because, we had that sort of hot and dry spell right during pollination. We had rains before it. We had certainly a much better weather pattern occur right after that. And really the last 3 weeks have been nearly ideal. So how does all of those ingredients go into the mix and what comes out is sort of my question. And like you said, look, we're talking, the very heart of the Corn Belt there. That's why I'm going east this year. I think I think you're going to see a lot of similarities in the Nebraska routes to kind of what we saw last year. I think western Iowa is going to look maybe fairly similar to last year. The western tour, I think my big question mark is what is that southern Minnesota route, the day 4 routes look like. But yeah, no, I think maybe I'm biased because it's the way I'm going, but I think the East is going to be the big question mark this year.
Okay, Sherman, same question to you. Since you're going on the Western leg, what do you want to see out there? What are you most curious to see in that Western leg?
I think it'll be that that Western Iowa and then the Southern Minnesota area, I think is going to be, from what I'm hearing, has been having some trouble, some dry areas. I think South Dakota, usually, I think this year is going to be really good, would be my hunch. And Nebraska is probably going to be quite a bit better than last year. But, being in Illinois, I'm in Southern Illinois. I know the tour doesn't quite get down to my area. It gets close. I mean, I have clients in Edgar County, which I think maybe you guys might touch into a little bit. But they're saying, the seed guys are going out in fields and they're saying it's not there. It's not there. So I don't know. I'm interested in Illinois because I haven't made any stops up through there. I think there's going to be some really good corn in Illinois. There's going to be some record corn in Illinois in certain spots. So are the bad areas in Illinois and Iowa going to be bad enough, to make a difference this year in what the national average is going to be? And I'm guessing, we'll wait and see how that all plays out. But it's the Iowa, Illinois is going to be what's going to be most interesting to me as far as what you guys find, on that leg of the tour.
Hey, Chip,
Yeah.
The dry land versus irrigated in Nebraska means so much to that state. What do you anticipate, and the irrigated's irrigated, right? I mean, they put water on it and it's just a matter of how big they can get their yields on those fields. Dry land, and the corner pivots in those irrigated fields, that makes a difference in Nebraska.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the big reason that Sherman is saying that he expects to see a better crop in Nebraska than what we saw a year ago, because there was more than a handful of zero yields on dryland corn in northeast Nebraska and southeast Nebraska. We had some zeros, and it's just because of when the heat hit and when the dry really stressed it. And those fields where we did pull a zero a year ago, it's because they just didn't set a viable ear. So it wasn't even good silage. You couldn't even make good silage out of the stuff. It was pretty pitiful. Now that 22 drought there was a hangover. When you look at the drought monitor this year, there was exceptional drought through eastern Nebraska for most of the year. Now they picked up rains and they've been some very timely rains, but there was that week where it was hot and it was dry, and that corn crop was under stress at a really difficult time. So just how well it survived that week is going to give us the results for Nebraska. And for the most part, you are exactly right, Brian. Irrigated corn is irrigated corn. If you run into a problem with it, with some tip back or the kernel row count or whatever it might be, you probably have got some real serious problems with the dryland corn. And I'm not saying that the dryland corn is going to be perfect. It's not in Nebraska, but I agree with Sherman. It should be better than what we saw a year ago.
Okay. We had another question come in. How did last year's results compare to USDA's finals? It's fair. Every year we have the opportunity to be either exactly right or exactly wrong. And was it 2 years ago, Chip, that we nailed them, both the corn and soybean estimates?
I would say that USDA finally got one right, but
yeah, okay. Yeah, that's probably a better way of saying it, but that will never happen again.
For honestly, both corn and soybeans.
Yeah, we absolutely nailed them. I think we missed by 1 million bushels on both of those, which is like more than bullseye for those that have tried to put estimates on it.
And you are talking about the pro farmer estimate instead of the crop tour here.
Yes. So there's a difference there, and I'll get to that at the very end here. just so everybody knows. Last year, how the pro farmer numbers, not the crop tour numbers, but how the pro farmer numbers lined up, we were too low on corn and too high on soybeans. So we undershot corn and overshot soybeans.
Yeah, but the corn estimate was off by like 39 million bushels.
Yeah, absolutely.
0.1% or something like that.
So the yield, we missed on the yield, the acreage difference. We made an acreage adjustment that
right.
USDA didn't last year.
Right. And then on soybeans, when we came back, we had some decent, not great, but we had some decent soil moisture available for the crop at the end of the tour last year. And there was rain in the forecast.
And
there was
rained.
rain in the forecast big time for the Corn Belt when we wrapped up tour last year, and it failed.
Yeah, those rains failed. It rained during crop tour. And one of the rules of crop tour for us, when we put together the pro farmer estimates, is if your boots get muddy during crop tour, the soybean crop is going to get bigger, and it just didn't. We didn't have the type of finishing weather last year that we anticipated. So that was part of the miss on that one. Excellent question. We'll answer that one many times next week. Trust me, that I get that question every year, and it's a great one.
You know, and as far as the crop tour goes, we know that the yield that is calculated for each state on corn is not going to match up with USDA. We know that. If it does, it's coincidence and USDA gets it right. But the thing is, we know historically by how much the crop tour yield and the USDA yield will differ. And that's what really makes it valuable. When you're looking at the crop tour results, the last thing that you want to do is compare it to where USDA put Illinois as of August 1. Number one, we're 2.5-3 weeks later. Number two, we do things differently. Number three, we're not trying to match up with anything that USDA is showing us. It's just a different process. And when you pull 350 samples out of one state, like Illinois, there's no need or reason to say, well, you know, we're hedging this way or we're hedging that way. No, we're not hedging either. Anyway, this is just what the numbers are telling us. Here they are. Then look at it and primarily focus on the percentage change year to year on crop tour. So if we're down 10% in Illinois from a year ago, maybe that translates into a final crop tour, into a final USDA yield for the state that might be 10% below where they ended up a year ago. So look at those percentage changes year to year, crop tour to crop tour.
Absolutely. And we had another question come in there that you kind of addressed, Chip. Are your procedures in line with USDA's and estimating procedures? I won't go into extreme details. You hit on it already, where we measure out 2 30-foot rows on corn and pull 3 ears from one of those rows, ear 5, 8, and 11. USDA lays out a plot within the field on corn. So that's quite a bit different than what we do. And then they go back to that same plot until it's fully harvested. So they revisit it every month. On soybeans, the procedure is closer. USDA puts a yield on it. Our methodology does not put a yield on it. Pro Farmer releases individual state yields on soybeans at the end of the week. Those are Pro Farmer numbers, not crop tour numbers, and I'll address that later on. So that's that.
Brian? If I show up at one of the evening meetings or am registered for one of the evening meetings out there on the road, I don't think you can just show up anymore because most of the venues are full. Yeah, yes. You've got to be registered in advance. Yep. But what should I expect when I get there?
Well, what you should expect is an evening full of data, one. But you not only get to hear from yourself and myself, and we do plenty of talking at those evening meetings, but we answer questions from the crowd. And probably most importantly, you'll get to hear route reports from our scouts. And so if somebody saw something completely different than I did, you will hear that on that night. If I was say in northern Indiana and somebody was in southern Indiana on that day, you will hear that and what they saw versus what I saw, and we go through it. I have scouts that go on the eastern leg that farm in the western corn belt. I have quite a few of those actually, and I always have them talk about what their crop is doing in their local area, so that people at that location, say in Indiana or Illinois, can find out what's happening west of the Mississippi River. Those types of things, and it just adds to the data that we present, the
Right.
raw data.
Right.
But and then just to get to mingle and talk
Yeah.
to a room full of producers.
Yep.
That
And-
huge networking event.
Yeah, and of course, there's the event leading up to the meeting. There's going to be sponsored booths that will be there while happy hour is going on. There will be some drink tickets available to you, and there's going to be a good meal served. The meal served at most locations is just outstanding.
Absolutely.
So looking forward to that. And of course, then the meeting. Now, if you can't make it, the streaming of 15-minute program where we release the details at 8:00 is going to be available as well.
Absolutely. Before we end this here, I want to get one last word of what you anticipate next week. Sherman, we'll start with you.
Being on the western leg, I mean, I'll be driving up through Illinois to get to Sioux Falls, so it'll be interesting to see some of that area as I go. But it'll be I think the Nebraska area again. I mean, I know some guys out there, like Chip was saying earlier, the dryland area, was under quite a bit of stress. It'll be interesting to see how good that is and what that western side of Iowa, and then of course come across that southern part of Minnesota on that last day. It'll be, I expect to see some stress in that area. So all in all, when it's all said and done, we love to go. It's a good time. It's a lot of work. And I enjoy doing it. I enjoy meeting everybody and along the way and meeting new friends. But overall, I think we'll just see a little bit of a better crop this year on the west than what we saw last year, though, overall.
Okay, excellent. Ted, same thing to you. What do you anticipate next? What's your biggest thing you want to find out next week?
Yeah, Brian, you said it earlier. You go into the tour with expectations. Often your expectations are going to be wrong. So we'll see. But listen, I certainly want to see what happened in that 10-day stretch right during pollination of hot and dry and how that affected the corn crop overall. Like we talked about, that central Illinois, eastern Iowa area is kind of my biggest area of interest. But my biggest expectation going into this tour is I think we're going to be saying on a daily basis about how big the potential is of this soybean crop. We know acreage is down, but my thought, and again, this is why we go on tour, we're going to find out next week, but my thought is I think I'm going to see a whole lot of really big soybean plants, which we all know, right, that big plants don't mean big yields necessarily. I mean, if you have a big plant with a less than ideal month of August, that plant's not going to really produce a whole lot in the way of pods. But if you give that big plant a really ideal August, I think the potential there is for some really massive soybean yields. So, like you said, preconceived notion, right? I could be proven completely wrong. I very well likely will be, but I want to see what the bean crop looks through the entire run of the eastern half. I want to hear what the guys in the west are seeing there too. And then, like I said, for corn, it's central Illinois into eastern Iowa.
Chip, what what are you looking for next week? What's the number one thing that you want to see next week?
Well,
on
my
crop
number
tour?
one concern is the variability. I mean, I hate to beat that up, but that's my biggest concern, and trying to manage that and to get enough samples so that so that we get that representative
Mhm.
idea of what's out there.
Well,
But
and I think it was Sherman that said it earlier that when we take all the samples, that smooths the lines
Yeah.
with that variability. So that give us a better picture at the end of the week than we have on an individual field or individual county or crop district or state, even for that matter.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I want to see how well the dryland did recover in Nebraska. I want to see how the crop handled that week of really hot conditions, since it did come at a very critical time. Brian, I was looking back at the old data the other day, and because there are questions about the number of kernel rows around the year, I continue to hear that. It's one of those things that comes up every year. It's tough to move the needle from an average of 16 or very close
Yes.
to 16.
Yes.
We need to keep that in mind. And it can have an impact on an individual field because it was planted in the wrong hour on the wrong day, and it turned into a 14 average instead of a 16 average. I get it. I know that happens, but smooth the lines out there, and I'm guessing we'll end up close to a 16 on that again.
Absolutely. And, that I think you guys all touched on the things that I want to see next week. One thing I do want to mention is the Pro Farmer crop estimates. Both the corn and soybean estimates are out at 1:30 Central Time a week from this Friday on August 25th. Those are separate from the crop tour data. Everything you see Monday through Thursday next week is crop tour data, raw data out of fields, and presented in that manner. The Pro Farmer estimates take into account the crop tour data, plus all the other factors. We adjust for acreage if needed, weather, how we think crops will finish, areas outside of those sampled on crop tour, and all those factors. And those numbers, I can't stress it enough, they are separate from crop tour. So crop tour data Monday through Thursday, and then Pro Farmer estimates on Friday. Two different sets of numbers. And to clear up some of the confusion, because we get this question every year, we will release state estimates on Friday that won't necessarily match up with what you've seen Monday through Thursday from that individual state. And those other factors are the reason for that. It isn't that we're trying to change numbers or anything like that. It's that one is Pro Farmer and the other one is crop tour raw data.
Yeah. And we know on average how the crop tour numbers line up with final numbers historically. So we need to make some adjustments.
Yeah, we make those adjustments in the Pro Farmer numbers. Ted, thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. We'll see you Sunday evening in Dublin. Yeah, looking forward
to it, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back on the East. Woo-hoo.
Yes, yeah. Sherman, you're going to have to wait a couple more days before we meet up. So on Thursday, we'll see you up in Rochester.
Right.
Enjoy your tour and, get there safely.
I'll see you Sunday, Sherm.
Oh, yeah. See you Sunday, Chip.
Yep.
Chip, same to you. Looking
Hey,
forward
Brian,
to it. Yeah.
One more reminder, go to agweb.com, get all the details on crop tour. Brian's going to have daily comments available on there. I will as well. If you want to get registered for the live streaming events, the details will be there on agweb.com.
Absolutely.
Have a safe trip.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.